The heat on the runway was unforgiving, the kind that pressed down on your shoulders and made every breath feel heavier than the last. The air shimmered above the asphalt, blurring the outlines of luxury jets parked in neat, proud rows like symbols of untouchable power. Engines purred softly in the distance. Assistants hurried with tablets in hand, and men in tailored suits spoke in hushed, urgent tones. This was a world where time was money and delays were unacceptable. And yet, standing near the far edge of the runway, almost blending into the background like a shadow no one cared to notice, was a man the world had long overlooked. Marcus Reed wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, smearing grease across his already stained skin. His overalls were faded from years of washing, the name patch stitched over his chest barely holding on by a few threads. His boots were scuffed, cracked at the seams, and soaked with oil that would never fully come out no matter how many times he scrubbed them. To anyone passing by, he was just another mechanic, another invisible worker keeping the engines of the wealthy running while his own life stalled at the starting line. Marcus had learned early on not to expect much from life. Growing up on the south side of the city that forgot kids like him the moment they learned to survive on their own, Marcus had developed a quiet resilience. His father had walked out when he was 9. His mother worked 2 jobs until her body finally gave in, leaving Marcus to grow up fast, take responsibility faster, and dream quietly. If at all, college was never an option. Trade school barely happened. Every step forward had come with 10 steps, pushing him back. Still, machines made sense to him in a way people never did. Machines didn't judge you by your skin. They didn't assume your intelligence by your clothes. They spoke in patterns, vibrations, sounds, honest signals if you knew how to listen. And Marcus listened better than most. That was why he was here. Or at least, that was why he had been here. His shift was technically over. Budget cuts had shaved hours off his paycheck again, and the supervisor had told him to clock out early, avoiding eye contact the way people did when they knew they were hurting you, but didn't care enough to stop. Marcus had packed up his tools slowly, each metallic clink echoing the weight of another day that paid less than it cost him to show up. Rent was overdue. His mom's medication refill was coming up. His phone screen had cracked last week, and his truck had started making a sound that meant trouble. The expensive kind, he sighed and turned toward the exit, ready to head home and pretend, once again, that tomorrow would be better. That's when he heard the voices. Sharp, tense, urgent. They weren't the normal sounds of routine maintenance or casual frustration. This was different. This was panic trying to stay polite. Marcus glanced toward the private terminal. At the center of the commotion sat a jet that didn't belong to just anyone. Sleek, black, immaculate. The kind of aircraft you only saw in magazines or documentaries about people who lived lives far removed from your own. The logo near the cockpit was subtle, but unmistakable. Arden Global Holdings. Even Marcus, who avoided the news most days, knew that name. Evelyn Arden, the billionaire. The woman who built an empire before most people figured out who they wanted to be. Her jet was surrounded by engineers, executives, and security personnel. Tablets were being checked. Voices were lowering. Shoulders were tightening. Time was slipping away, and the jet wasn't moving. Inside the aircraft, Evelyn Arden sat perfectly still, her posture straight, her expression controlled, but her mind racing faster than any engine ever could. She had learned long ago that power didn't mean immunity. It meant responsibility, and failure carried consequences that rippled through thousands of lives. This flight wasn't optional. In less than 2 hours, she was supposed to land overseas and sign documents that would finalize a multi-billion-dollar merger. Investors were waiting. Board members were watching. The world expected her to arrive, on time, composed, unstoppable. Instead, her jet refused to cooperate. 3 senior technicians had already tried. Diagnostics returned conflicting results. Systems that should never fail were throwing warnings that didn't make sense. The head engineer finally cleared his throat and said the one thing Evelyn hated hearing. "We're not sure what's wrong, ma'am." Those words landed heavier than turbulence. Evelyn stood up. She stepped onto the runway, heels clicking sharply against the pavement, eyes scanning the scene with a precision that had built empires and dismantled competitors. She didn't yell. She didn't panic. She simply asked one question. How long? The answer wasn't reassuring. Meanwhile, a few yards away, Marcus stood frozen. He knew he should leave. This wasn't his problem. This wasn't his jet. This wasn't his world. But something gnawed at him. He listened. The explanations didn't line up. The engineers were focused on the obvious, the big systems, the flashy diagnostics. Marcus had learned the hard way that the most dangerous problems hid in the quiet places. The ones no one thought to check because everything else looked perfect. His hands tightened around his tool bag. He took a step forward, then another. A senior engineer noticed him immediately and frowned. Hey, this area is restricted. Marcus stopped, raised his hands slightly in a gesture of peace. I just overheard. What error code are you getting? The engineer scoffed, eyes flicking over Marcus's uniform, his skin, his boots. We've got it handled. Marcus nodded slowly. You sure? Because if it's showing intermittent voltage loss without a hard failure, that usually points to. That's enough. The engineer snapped. You can go. Marcus hesitated. That was when Evelyn Arden looked directly at him. Not past him. Not through him. At him. The world seemed to pause. She had seen thousands of faces in her life. Ambitious ones, desperate ones, deceptive ones. Marcus's face wasn't any of those. It was calm, focused, curious. The look of someone who didn't need to prove anything because he already knew what he was capable of. What's your name? She asked. The question cut through the tension like a blade. Marcus swallowed. Marcus Reed. And you believe you can help? He didn't puff his chest. He didn't stutter. I think I can find the problem. The head engineer laughed nervously. Ms. Arden, with respect, this aircraft is extremely complex. He's junior staff. Evelyn didn't even glance at him. How much time do I have before this delay costs me the deal? Less than an hour. She looked back at Marcus. You have 15 minutes. Marcus nodded once. That was all he needed. As he climbed beneath the jet, the eyes of the runway followed him. Some skeptical, some amused, some quietly rooting for him without knowing why. Marcus tuned out the noise. He ran his hands along the wiring, listened to the hum of the systems, felt the subtle vibrations that told a story diagnostics couldn't. There was a tiny fault, a sensor overriding the main system because of a misread voltage fluctuation, harmless on its own, catastrophic in combination. The kind of issue that only showed itself if you stopped looking at the big picture and paid attention to the whisper beneath it. Marcus fixed it. He didn't rush. He didn't doubt himself. 8 minutes later, he climbed out. Start it, he said. The engines roared to life, smooth and flawless. The silence that followed was deafening. Engineers stared. Assistants froze. Security guards shifted uneasily. Evelyn Arden didn't move. As she walked toward Marcus, each step deli. Then she walked toward Marcus, each step deliberate. You just saved my company, she said. Marcus shrugged lightly. It's my job. She studied him for a long moment. The grease on his hands, the exhaustion in his eyes, the quiet confidence he wore like armor. Without another word, she reached into her pocket. And then, to the shock of everyone watching, the billionaire knelt down on the hot runway in front of a struggling mechanic no one had noticed an hour earlier. Marcus's heart stopped. The world gasped. And in that moment, as her eyes met his, steady and certain, everything Marcus thought he knew about his place in the world began to fall apart. Because this wasn't just about a jet. This was about destiny choosing the most unexpected moment to change everything.